Wallis and Fisher in the Financial Times have written a very interesting article, and I'm somewhat relieved in a way not to be alone in saying the things I've been saying. But the recent events, the recent riots across the UK, not in Scotland, as a lot of people quite keep pointing out. Scotland is different, partly because there's a very limited representation by Reform UK in Scotland, and partly also because of the energetic work of people like Humza Yousaf in holding banners and saying migrants are welcome, even if there aren't that many migrants yet in Scotland. The atmosphere is different. And the UK, and now I'm speaking about the UK as a concept rather than as geographical individual countries, the UK has been gripped by far-right riots targeting asylum seekers, immigrants, and the legal profession and the police. And why would this be? Partly because of the lefty lawyers, sobriquet, partly because of the small boats slogans, and so on. A critical examination of the rhetoric used by prominent Conservative ministers, notably the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, James Cleverly, and so on, Robert Jenrick, Priti Patel. These reveal a disturbing connection between the inflammatory language and the violence now unfolding, and the persistent demonisation of asylum seekers and immigrants by Conservative leaders, by a range, one after the other, of Conservative leaders, all spouting the same hostile environment mantras put out by Theresa May. It's been identified by critics as a catalyst for the current unrest. William Wallis and Lucy Fisher's article in the Financial Times today highlights how the vilification of these groups began when Tory ministers normalised anti-immigrant sentiments, paving the way for what is now far-right extremism. Sunak stopped the boats pledge. Braverman's characterisation of asylum seekers as an invasion exemplify this harmful rhetoric. The rhetoric from Conservative ministers has had a tangible effect on public sentiment and social cohesion. Robert Jenrick, this prominent figure who now wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party, has made speeches warning that uncontrolled migration threatens to erode British compassion and social values. His statements, which suggest that migrants have lifestyles fundamentally incompatible with British traditions, contribute to the climate of hostility. But his statement that uncontrolled migration erodes passion, compassion and social values is almost giving an excuse for the erosion of compassion and social values, isn't it? This hostility, this climate of hostility. Enver Solomon of the Refugee Council underscores how such language has fostered hatred and the vilification of refugees, manifesting itself violently on the streets. In the wake of the violence, there has been a notable silence from the key figures. Suella Braverman, mute, for the first time ever. Mute! She's not commented on the situation. And critics argue this is a failure to acknowledge the consequence of her previous statements, of her previous barking. Baroness Saida Warsi, the former Conservative Party chair, has long warned of the dangers of Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. She asserts that the current Labour government, despite its imperfections, is at least attempting to address the unrest, unlike her Conservative colleagues who she believes would exacerbate the situation, who would inflame the situation with more incendiary rhetoric. The legal profession, often blamed by the previous government for hindering immigration control measures, has been a target of far-right threats. Apparently, the houses, the accommodation, and the business premises of immigration lawyers has been circulated on the internet to be targeted tonight. Outrageous! Zoe Bantelman from the Immigration Law Practitioners Association, Nick Emerson from the Law Society of England and Wales both point to the harmful effects of divisive rhetoric from senior politicians. These politicians should be held to account. They argue that such language creates an environment where hostility towards legal professionals and the migrants they represent becomes acceptable. It is not acceptable. The riots currently shaking the UK, shaking England, shaking Northern Ireland particularly, are not isolated incidents, but are rooted in years of inflammatory rhetoric from the Conservative ministers, and indeed partly also the hostile environment was set up in the last years of the last administration, of the last Labour administration. So I'm afraid the Labour administration can't be swaggering around and saying nothing to do with us, mates, because it is. And Keir Starmer and his friends still run around the place with the slogan, "Stop the boats." That needs to go. That needs to go. The demonisation of asylum seekers and immigrants by figures like Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick has contributed to a climate where far-right violence can flourish. And everything that triggers that needs to go. This is the genie that has been freed from the bottle, a direct result of the normalisation of hate-filled language, which might be okay in the confines of Parliament, safe within parliamentary privilege, to demonise whoever you want, Suella. But this is the result. This is the result. They get out on the street and they cannot be controlled because you let this genie out of the bottle. The silence of figures like Braverman in the face of this unrest speaks volumes about the need of accountability, the need for accountability, and a shift, a firm shift towards more responsibility and inclusive political discourse. Suella Braverman should be brought to Parliament to answer for what she has done.